Generations 1 and 2 have a hard limit of 999 for the purpose of damage calculation. The purpose of this is so that at no point in the damage formula is the number bigger than 1023, which is important because that is a video game number. It is the highest number that can be represented in 10 bits. In Generation 1, a level 100 Mewtwo will have a special stat of 406, assuming it has perfect BVs and max stat experience. Yes, those are different than IVs and EVs. Just look it up. Please, just look it up. This means that a perfect Mewtwo can only use Amnesia twice before it hits the limit, because a +4 Mewtwo will have a special stat of 1218. For reasons unknown to God or man, their method of stopping you from gaining more positive stat modifiers once you've hit the limit is just to simultaneously apply a -1 modifier every time you do. And I guess they just forgot that there's 3 moves that give you a +2 stat boost instead of a +1. Oops. Oopsie. This means that if a perfect Mewtwo amnesias twice, it can amnesia one more time, raising its stage to +5, and it will have a stat of 1421. Normally this doesn't matter, because anytime you do that past 999, it'll just stay 999. It always applies that limit after a positive stat modifier. However, due to a programming error, the check to see if you're over 999 is not applied after a negative stat modifier, which means that after a negative stat modifier, the stat can exceed 1023 and roll over past 0. So, given a long enough PP war, or just a battle against someone who expects the game to work correctly, if a Mewtwo with +5 special is hit by Psychic and its special stage is lowered to 4, its special stat will roll over past 0, becoming some very mediocre number that you can just fucking hit it with any move with when it does have those numbers. Mewtwo's attacking options are actually very malleable. This is one of the only Pokemon in Gen 1 that learns more than 4 moves it wants to use, and actually has the stats to use them. You can drop Psychic entirely and just roll full team coverage. This has the advantage of being able to freeze the other Mewtwo without being in danger of getting PP stalled by Slowbro. Exeggutor is less likely to explode on you now, but you do have to worry more about Snorlax self-destructing on you, because you need to chip it more before you can kill it with a +4 Thunderbolt or Ice Beam. It is important to note, though, that a +4 Psychic doesn't one-shot Snorlax from full HP either. Bummer. Also, without Psychic, you just get PP stalled by Light Screen Chansey for days. You can try to freeze it with Ice Beam, but that will activate Freeze Claws, and one of the main advantages of using Ice Beam is that you can try to freeze the other Mewtwo. An elegant solution to the Chansey problem is just to use Submission, the worst good move in Pokemon history.
Oh yeah, I was gonna pour myself some milk.
Very likely to two-shot Chansey, especially when you take into account that Mewtwo crits a little bit more than 25% of the time. Submission also hilariously makes you much better in the Mewtwo Ditto because it has as much PP as Thunderbolt and Ice Beam combined. This is definitely the tier where PP management is the most equivalent to HP management, and I would recommend you play it if you aren't already convinced that some of the PP values in this game are, like, wildly high. Jesus Christ. Wow. What? You expect to do more of that? So little. Oh, yeah. Jesus Christ, 32 PP. Are you kidding me? Speaking of, Mewtwo can basically guarantee that it wins the PP war against the other Mewtwo by using the combination of Amnesia, Recover, and Barrier, which, combined with Thunderbolt, have 136 PP. Even more effective if you can get your Mewtwo paralyzed beforehand. The disadvantage is that you only have one attacking move's worth of TP before your opponent can just switch Soul forever. Also, the turns you're spending using Barrier are more turns where Gen 1 can happen to you and you can just get fucking frozen, but still, you can do this. You can do this to someone you presumably know pretty well, because you had to ask them to play Gen 1 Goobers with you, because there's not a permanent ladder for it.
Okay, you said he submitted. Pastor.
To note is that a Mewtwo set like this that just
He said to make sure for me to check them, so I'll check them right now.
What about, did he do both or just one?
Both. That's what he said.
Which will prevent it from overflowing when it's dropped.
Yeah. For Alex Padilla and Adam Schiff.
On Showdown, you would accomplish this with 26 IVs and 8 EVs. In Real, you would accomplish this with 13 DVs and some amount of stat experience. I don't know how much. I don't want to figure it out.
Yes. They're both completed.
They're both sending it?
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's not as strong as an Executor, Explosion, or Snorlax's.
Okay, so tomorrow I work on your list of...
Oh yeah, I need to send Loyola. I almost forgot.
And securing a kill on the other Mewtwo can set the stage for a sweep with Amnesia Slowbro or Swords Dance Mew. Oh yeah, there's another one. So before Mew was the most goated hyper offense mon of all time, it was merely the second best Pokemon in the game.
Baby, beautiful boy, baby.
Second comes after first. Mew certainly gets overshadowed by Mewtwo as the base of Gen 1 Ubers because Mew's traits are less clickbait.
Nada, baby, nada.
And it has the most boringest numbers of all time. But I'll have you know, you're looking at a Pokemon that has 97.
I had some direct admissions offers, Tati.
Huh?
I had some direct admissions offers.
Uber's viability rate.
I have admissions offers.
To organize everything.
Admissions offers what?
Very.
I think it's like colleges that are willing to, they're offering me. The only one I know that's from here, from close to here, is like Whittier College. The only one I like kind of know is Whittier College.
But that's a community college.
I know.
Slightly less impressive than one where some of the TMs are just like worse than tackle or don't do anything or are banned for causing the fucking game to desync. But signing the Dark contract with Route 25 Youngster does give you a Sword Dance user that's better than Victory Ball. Mew is almost as defined by Swords Dance as Mewtwo is by Amnesia. And even though Swords Dance seems just worse on paper, Mew does appreciate boosting sort of perpendicular to Mewtwo so that the boosts don't just cancel each other out. Also, the physical bulk of the tier is just generally lower than the special bulk. To complete the parallel, Mew even learns a recovery move. It is undeniably funny that Softboiled is a TM in Gen 1, and 2 fucking Pokemon learn it. Neither of which is the guy who looks like this. Those 2 moves make up the backbone of almost every Mew set, but there's not really a standard setup to complement it. There's actually a lot of different directions you can go in. I guess the most obvious combo is just to go with Body.
Okay, it's been submitted. I submitted the Loyola one.
The best, no drawback physical moves. Not just that Mew learns, but just like in the game. The combination of Mew's attacks on a Swords Dancer with recovery can be pretty overwhelming. And if Mew was a normal type, it would probably be better than Mewtwo. This setup doesn't have an immediately threatening offensive presence, so it is pretty susceptible to getting status while it's setting up by Pokemon like Executor or Slowbro. And while Mewtwo sometimes likes being paralyzed because it helps it PP stall and it keeps it from getting frozen, Mew almost always hates getting paralyzed. Mew does have access to Explosion to rectify this, which has more immediate pressure and threatens to one-shot everything except Gengar and Rock types with Wonders. However, you do relegate yourself to either being walled by Gengar or forced to explode on Zapdos, depending on your choice of the other attacking move. I guess you could also run Explosion over Soft Coil if you're fucking nuts, if you're crazy. If you got that dog in you. I guess it's worth noting that unless you run Rock Slide, you get 100% walled and stalled by Reflect, Rest, Aerodactyl, whose unique combination of a ground immunity and a normal resistance actually serves a function, unlike in OU. It's still not, like, good, because it's not like Slowbro, who can PP stall Mewtwo and sweep. Aerodactyl literally just PP stalls Mew, but it is, like, pretty funny. Reflect in one attacking move has possibly the highest ceiling of any Mew set, and is a pretty terrifying win condition under certain circumstances. Reflect makes Mew less afraid of one of the most consistent ways of removing Mew and Mewtwo, which is Self-Destruct and Explosion, and also gives it the edge in a Mew Ditto against a Mew that doesn't have Reflect. Once again, the issues are being walled by either Gengar or Zapdos, and also just boosting with multiple moves over the course of multiple turns, and like so many bad things can happen in Gen 1. You think you're bad until Tauros crits you twice and steals the catalytic converter off your car. You can also go with more of a goon set that just sits around and pisses you off and then explodes on you. Probably pretty good. Probably some pretty good stuff. Paralysis plus Explosion is very good in Gen 1 because if something is faster than you and explodes, you don't take an action that turn. So even if a Mew or Mewtwo predicts it, they can't just soft coil or recover to offset the damage. Probably the funniest set Mew can run is Transform, which basically serves as a very specific counter to other Mews that don't have Reflect or Thunder Wave. Since it basically just turns you into a Mew that does have those moves, plus the other good moves. You Thunder Wave the other Mew and use Reflect, which stays active even after you transform into the other Mew, and then you have their Swords Dance boosts, plus Reflect, plus their Paralyzed. If that happens, you're probably going to win the game, but you can pretty much only go for it when you think you can win the game, because if you reveal the set too early, then it becomes almost useless. I suppose Transform does have some utility outside of that, in that, like, if you transform into the other Mewtwo, you've got two Mewtwo's, right? So you do have to run some other Pokemon. As much as you and I both wish every game could just be this happening 6 times.
What do you know? I want to go make something to eat, okay?
Okay, ¿qué vas a comprar?
Ya, ya dormí, ya. Porque si no, no puedo
I'm a
hacer
big
pedo.
man. I'm a big, expensive man. Snorlax is maybe a little more linear.
So the everything is contexto Padilla?
I'm just waiting on Miss Cruz. I don't think she's back yet.
But
Okay.
Snorlax's ability to 1v1 pretty much any Pokemon in the game with just its huge HP and big stupid stab moves does extend to first Pokemon as well. Snorlax is honestly probably about as good as Mew at making progress on average, and really appreciates there being fewer normal types and more psychic types in general, because it gives it more targets that it can paralyze with Body Slam. A paralyzed Mewtwo is very afraid of the Snorlax, and even an unparalyzed Mewtwo is afraid of the Snorlax at full HP. You can't even kill it with a crit psychic at max special because in Gen 1 crits ignore your own positive stat modifiers. Also, having a stat self-destruct is just very nice. Like, you blow up so much in Gen 1 Ubers. It's pretty much the funniest thing about it. Alright, I know what everybody's wondering, and don't worry, Chansey is a staple, okay? Don't you goddamn worry. Yes, the Pokemon that already feels like it was modded into the game is pretty good in a tier where the best Pokemon is a special attacker. The mid-game sleeper set with Sing functions about as well as it does in OU, but with the juiciest sleep target in the world with Mewtwo. It's still Sing though, but you try not to think about it. Invented. Reinvented. Invented. Reinvented. Join Planet Fitness for $1 down, $15 a month. The deadline for this deal is October 31st. Don't worry, Shaq. The General gives you a break to keep you covered. Whether it's on your car insurance or a break from your car acting up.
Don't sing if you want to live long. Have no use for your song. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead, you're dead and never spawn.
Seismic Toss is the most consistent damage when you're trying to spread your dual status, but you can go Ice Beam to try to fucking freeze something too. However, Ice Beam is a hell of a lot less threatening to a Mewtwo that is already status. Ice Beam is probably the option you want to go with if you're going to run Light Screen, a move whose only function is to piss Mewtwo off and waste its time. That's the Chansey special, baby. Light Screen can still lose in the long run to special drops from Mewtwo's Psychic,
Baby,
but it does
you
give you a lot of
have it
opportunities
so good,
to try
baby.
to
You
freeze
need
it
to
with
be
Ice Beam,
thankful.
or
Okay?
even just hit your own Chansey Frozen so it activates Freeze Claws and you don't have to worry about something that can actually make progress on your team getting frozen.
You might glad he's frozen in there and that we're out here.
Chansey is very passive, and hence is not necessarily an auto-include like Mewtwo, Mew, and Snorlax are, but it does solve the most amount of headaches in the most concise way, so you still do need like a damn good reason not to use it. The rest of these are really going to be in no particular
Baby.
order, unless I
Okay.
specifically mention it. It really just depends on your team composition and your ideal win condition, and which ones you think are the most handsome. Who's carved up? Who's your carved beef? Of the RBY,
What, baby?
holy trinity of Snorlax, Tauros, and Chansey, Tauros definitely suffers the most in Ubers. It's still really fucking good. It just goes from being probably the best Pokemon in the game to like maybe top 5. Tauros just happens to not have the tools to deal with for the role of a revenge killer and late game cleaner.
It's because you're here, Tate.
Since Tauros is no longer the game piece that's the most likely to win you the game, it means you can play a lot more recklessly with it early game and take full advantage of its wall-breaking abilities. And in fact, Tauros' best use in Ubers is probably as an immediately threatening lead. Like, this is season 6 of an HBO drama, Tauros, where he has nothing left to lose. Something kind of funny is that Tauros can get away with running Stomp over Blizzard and Ubers, because the two main targets for Blizzard, Golem and Rhydon, are a lot harder to fit onto a team, and Stomp gives it a tool to try to cheese Mewtwo as well as goose its odds a little bit against leads like Jinx. You gotta always give respect to the patron saint of bullshit.
Okay, man, I'm gonna go get something.
Gen 1
Okay.
Exeggutor is a truly blessed.
So we're just waiting on this
And
first?
is,
Yeah.
in a vacuum,
Well, it's
maybe
mine.
the scariest Pokemon to be looking at full HP. Executor has the typing and mixed both to check a wide variety of Mew and Mewtwo sets and either threaten to give them a debilitating status condition or just blow up on them and kill them. Similar to Executor's problems are that it's slow and kind of predictable and has to take a lot of neutral hits to do its job most of the time. So it tends to not stick around for very long, but the moves it always uses are so fucking good that it's basically guaranteed to do something whenever you send it out. Like, Executor is how you turn those 150 turn Gen 1 Ubers games into, like, 30 turn games. I don't know. Executor is my favorite Gen 1 OU staple. He's so funny. Sometimes he'll just, like, kill half your team in 3 turns.
You're my shiny boy. You're the best.
Zapdos is, unsurprisingly, pretty solid. Zapdos is the most pretty solid Pokemon of all time. In Scarlet and Violet, Zapdos will probably be pretty solid. Zapdos' ground immunity is out of premium maneuvers and allows it to pivot around Mew and scout its moveset, and even completely wall some movesets. They'll usually at least have Explosion to kill you, but that's a good trade because Zapdos is a way lower value target than Mew, because it sucks against Mewtwo. Basically, all Zapdos can do to Mewtwo is paralyze it with Thunder Wave, and you have to get really lucky with Drill Peck crits and full paras to actually be able to beat it. Zapdos does do well against almost everything else, though, especially in a metagame with fewer Rhydons, Golems, and Jolteons. And it turns out there's not that many Onixes either. I suppose it's also worth mentioning that Zapdos is often the cause or victim of 2 other Gen 1 stat calculation glitches. The first is that if you use agility while you're paralyzed, it will immediately give you twice your original speed and hence just completely ignore the paralysis speed drop. The other is that if you change your or your opponent's stat stage while your opponent is paralyzed, it will reapply the paralysis speed drop to them.
Oh my gosh. Dude.
Dude. A lot more maneuvers because there's way more stat boosting. Like here, this paralyzed Snorlax is faster than this paralyzed Mew because when the Mewtwo used Amnesia against the Mew, it set its speed to 1/16 of its original value. Slowbro is probably the funniest Pokemon that can hang with Mew and Mewtwo and Ubers. Amnesia and its good mixed bulk and resistances make it one of the rare Pokemon that can paralyze Mew and Mewtwo with Thunder Wave and then actually do something to them once they are paralyzed. Rest also means that you can PP stall non-Thunderbolt Mewtwo's even if they're paralyzed, because Rest will preserve your PP as much as the full paras will preserve theirs. Slowbro also does really well against Snorlax and Boros, just like it does in OU. And there's something to be said for being an Amnesia sweeper that's not directly outclassed by Mewtwo. However, Slowbro is probably the most likely Pokemon in the game to get cheese, because it's slower than everything and asleep half the time. Despite getting absolutely mollywopped by Mewtwo, Gengar is still about as good as it is in OU, and maybe even slightly better, just because it benefits from pretty much everything else about the Uber's metagame. Gengar is still the fastest sleep lead, but it has a lot of mid-game utility in forcing you to run Earthquake to deal with it, and also being able to switch into all the explosions. It does still have to worry about pretty much every Pokemon it wants to switch into being able to just hit it with Earthquake, but guess you're just gonna have to use your gamer brain. Jinx functions almost identically to how it does in OU. It's still the fastest Pokemon with a reasonably accurate sleep move, and Blizzard can just kill you in one hit. I think I despise this Pokemon. Jinx has almost non-existent mid-game utility outside of switching into random ice beams, but it can definitely get you off to a strong start. Counter in the last slot can help you whoop the reasonably common Tauros lead without having to burn your sleep move. I see Jinx as occupying a similar position that Slowbro does in OU, where it's the worst Pokemon that will still help you win most of the time. But I'm no authority. I'm just a simple country spider farmer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's what you've been waiting for. It's the Dingus Lightning Round. These are Pokemon that are good enough to be worth considering, but they are noticeably less consistent than they are in OU. Ready? Is a decent lead who plays Thunderwave real nice, but gets set up on all the way, and also can't really do anything fancy. Theoretically have a high ceiling, but they're slow and weak to special moves and earthquake. Like, what are we ever gonna do other than Zapdos or Seismic Toss Chansey? You'd think Golem would actually be better than Rhydon because Explosion is so important, but Rhydon is still probably better because his Earthquake gets better damage threshold.
Just send a message. Well,
I don't think she's back yet. That's the problem.
Yeah, you see.
Same old song.
Can you please let me know when you do it? I really appreciate it.
As a super effective move, I'm gonna force. Jolteon is a real cutie pie and likes less Rhydons and Golems, but since being faster than Tauros and Starmie is less important, I feel like outside of walling Zapdos, you would usually rather just have Zapdos. Is another decent lead and can switch into Mewtwo and use Thunderwave and then switch out. Is admittedly more niche than any of those Pokemon, but I'm going to talk about it here anyway, because I really like Pidgeot. And it's my show, okay? I'm holding the talking pillow. Persian Slash is the most Chad way possible to deal with Reflect Mew, and Screech Hyper Beam is a gamer combo that does more damage than 2 slashes. And if it doesn't kill a Mewber, it at least forces them to switch out of basically any physical attacker you bring in next. Funny stuff. Funny stuff. There aren't really any Pokemon that are bad in OU that are suddenly good in Ubers, but there are a few Pokemon who technically have a very narrow niche in Ubers that they do not have in OU. As I mentioned earlier, Aerodactyl is kind of like the Porygon of Ubers, where it is a basically 100% counter to one set on one good Pokemon, and it sucks against basically everything else in the tier. Honestly, Aerodactyl is probably worse in Ubers than Porygon is in OU, because at least Porygon learns status moves. Aerodactyl does go for the throat though. Moltres has a similar defensive profile to Zapdos that lets it check you, while also bringing that good cheese to the table with Agility Fire Spin. However, other than Fire Blast just having good numbers, Fire is a pretty bad offensive type, and also Moltres' move pool is fucking awful. Charizard is a little less physically bulky than Moltres and has a way weaker Fire Blast, but has a much better move pool otherwise, including being able to surprise Mew with counter, because Charizard cannot be one-shot by a +6 Mew body slam. Obviously, Mew can beat Moltres and Charizard with Hyper Beam, and Moltres, Charizard, and Aerodactyl with Rock Slide, but, like, Hyper Beam is pretty niche, and Rock Slide is like, are you really gonna run it just to hit these fucking goobers? Really? Hypno is kind of like a crappy Exeggutor that you can lead with and spread dual status with early while preserving your Exeggutor in the back to click its amazing buttons later. Also, Hypno can switch into Mewtwo like one time, I guess, and click Hypnosis, which is better than Sing 5% of the time. Now, where's my Uber's tradebacks tier so I can bully Mewtwo with Hypnosis and Hypno? Ditto is apparently more viable here than it is in any tier pre-imposter. Like, I scoured the public Gen 1 Uber's replays for this video, and I saw Ditto a couple of times from some pretty good people. Also, it's ranked on Pokemon Perfect, so I don't know. I guess you can transform into a paralyzed Mewtwo and maybe kill it and beat your opponent with 20 PP, or more likely just waste the Mewtwo's PP for 20 turns, but I suppose that is better than a lot of Pokemon can claim to do to.
Good job.
So there's 21 Pokemon that you can justify using to some degree. Not to mention the reasonably viable OU Pokemon that I just didn't talk about. Probably more than you were expecting, given Gen 1 Mewtwo's reputation and the reputation of the Psychic type in Gen 1 as a whole. The most consistent counters in Mewtwo is Mewtwo, so you aren't nearly as hamstrung by your other 5 team slots as it would initially seem. I think that RBY Ubers and any RBY metagame in general will improve your hedging ability, aka just picking options that have the most amount of positive outcomes. Gen 1 is unapologetically chaotic and arbitrary, and the outcome of the turn can be very volatile, even when you think you have an advantage. You're also greatly rewarded for positioning yourself intelligently early game to preserve your big stupid win condition. It is Gen 1 though, so sometimes you're just greatly rewarded. Period. I'm teasing it. Yes, it worked.
You don't deserve this.
Oh, come on. Oh my god, I'm so good. The early game should be spent spreading your status and trying to open up holes in the other team. But once the Mewtwo presents itself, then neutralizing that obviously of your game plan. Status is the most common tool that Pokemon have to put Mewtwo at a disadvantage, particularly paralysis. And paralyzing Mewtwo can be very helpful as long as you can capitalize on it in some other way. Like by using multiple exploders like Gengar and Golem, or just using generally strong Pokemon like Rhydon and Hyper Beam Snorlax. Otherwise, if you're using something like Sing and Ice Beam Chansey, or just Ice Beam on your own Mewtwo, then you're going to want to keep their Mewtwo unparalyzed so you can do that to them. Like, if your Mewtwo is at +4 and theirs is frozen, like, what are they gonna do? Have to scout it first, but you know the best way to deal with it. But in general, the defensive combination of Gengar and something that can take an Earthquake, like Executor or Zapdos, can be very useful. Mew is also similarly exploited by status, and even though Explosion is almost guaranteed to make progress, as long as you can get Mew to explode on something other than your own Mew or Mewtwo, it's usually a net positive trade for you. And if all else fails, just PP stall. Just drain the PP. Just get it all out of there. This is a metagame where the two best Pokemon that you're almost guaranteed to have on every team are two bulky, boosting sweepers with recovery and no weaknesses. So assuming you both play pretty conservatively, it will come down to just having more buttons to click than your opponent does. If you can see a PP war coming, just try to put off paralyzing them as long as you can, and if possible, just fish for a freeze. If it Otherwise, Gen 1 Ubers is just played largely similarly to Gen 1 OU. You spread your broken status, you click your big stupid moves, you know when to sack stuff to obvious explosions, and since your resources are so similar, you go for good trades and use smart double switches to force your way into an advantage. And just try to be in positions where you're the least likely to just get completely fucked by Gen 1 mechanics. So that's the Gen 1 Ubers video. I hope you learned something. I hope that I will quit seeing YouTube every time I close my eyes.
Come live with all that people. Glad you're welcome.
Some Pokemon force switches. And some Pokemon cause glitches. But some Pokemon have niches.
Well, you know what they say. Find what your niche is. That leads to riches.
It can be a little overwhelming firing up the Showdown Team Builder and seeing that there are like a billion little goofball big dogs that you can choose from, but it turns out you really only have to worry about the ones that are like fucking good. Sure, competitive Pokemon is like the most granular strategy game ever made, but there are only so many roles, and it's usually pretty obvious which Pokemon do each one just like way better than everything else. This one's the best at doing this. Pretty cool. This one's the best at doing this. Pretty. And this one's the best at raising your resting heart rate. The truly blessed Pokemon tend to have good numbers, and maybe they have good words, and maybe they learn every fucking move like they learn every single goddamn move. And then the other 99% of Pokemon, they just kind of do one thing. If they're lucky.
Now, God knows Child can take you guys one-on-one.
Yeah, we do the best we can. We try.
But sometimes, even the worst Pokemon you've ever seen in your life can do a lollipop dance that, with a long enough list of qualifiers, cannot technically be replicated by any Pokemon that isn't total dog shit ass. And if they're lucky, maybe they can even ride that success all the way to the bottom of the top of the meta charts. So that's that's why that's what this is about. RBY Ubers has a reputation as a metagame with a very rigid hierarchy that there's generally very little reason to deviate from. However, being so centralized around just a few top threats does incentivize you to use weird, unoptimal crap to hopefully catch your opponent off guard while preserving your key game pieces. In the past, some scholars have discussed how Ditto can switch in on a paralyzed Mewtwo as it recovers, transform into it, and then proceed to waste its PP in increments of 20, a theoretically infinite amount of times, And also how Reflect Porygon can do the same thing to Mew, except you don't even have to switch out. And I spent 9,999 coins on this son of a bitch, so you better goddamn believe I'm gonna look at it for 9,999 turns. But what if I told you there's an even funnier Pokemon to use in Ubers that even more desperately wants your attention? Yes, Golbat, the ultimate pick-me Pokemon, was just trying to help you in Ubers all 9,000 times you've encountered it. What's the utility? Well, obviously, it's because Leech Life is a clean 15-hit KO against Mewtwo. Oh yeah, also it beats Mew. Well, it beats some Mew sets. Okay, it beats one Mew set, but that's like 10th percentile for RDY. Stardy can't do that. Alakazam can't do that. That's pretty good. Basically, Golbat walls Earthquake, Explosion, Swords Dance, Soft Boiled Mew. Obviously, you don't wall Explosion, but the benefit of trading Mew for Golbat is debatable.
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
The reason to use specifically Golbat and not literally any other flying type, who may or may not be the 6th best Pokemon in RDY 7U, is that Golbat has Mega Drains and 3-hit KO, the likely Rhydon and Golem switch-in who would want to exploit Zapdos, who is the typical counter to that Mew set. And compared to, like, Gyarados or Articuno, Golbat is hilariously a lot more threatening to a paralyzed Mewtwo switch-in. Screech into a paralyzed Mewtwo will make it slower than a paralyzed Snorlax and make Snorlax's Body Slam a 2-hit KO. And Hyper Beam is a possible 1-hit KO from full HP. It also makes it get one-shot by Mew's Explosion. And if you don't like any of those words, Golbat also has Confuse Ray, which is a status move that you can hit Mewtwo with even after it's paralyzed. And then I guess you can play the numbers game and theoretically just 1v1 it with Double Edge. Mewtwo, no, don't go in Cerulean Cave. No, Mewtwo, it's too dangerous for you. Ubers is definitely Gen 1 Golbat's best tier that isn't just completely fucking made up, but in OU, Golbat is technically the only Haze user that's actually faster than every viable Swords Dance or Amnesia Sweeper. Not Tentacruel though, but every strategy has some weakness. But if you decide you want to use a Pokemon that's like actually good, but still maintain the classic mid-tier option select so you have something to blame your losses on, there's always level 85 Chansey, which is a French pick due to reliably setting up the 255 HP recovery glitch by using Seismic Toss 3 times. Gamers probably already know that because Big Yellow talks about it, but what maybe you might don't know is that that is not the only creamy pinkum in Gen 1 with a very defined niche. Because you see, level 3 Jigglypuff is by far the best Pokemon in the game at de-syncing Elite Battle. This is because Jigglypuff is the lowest level Pokemon you can catch in Kanto that can learn Psywave. And Psywave, typical for being a move that takes a couple sentences to describe, is programmed incorrectly in Gen 1, and can occasionally do 0 damage on one side of the Link battle, and 1 damage on the other. And this will eventually just goof the hell out of the game.
It's not a cage, it's a turd. Just have faith. Can you hear me?
This has a 1 in 101 chance of happening at level 100, but at level 3 it has a 1 in 4 chance of happening. This is still kind of a dubious niche because it will never make you win a game. All it can do is force a draw, and also it's not implemented on Showdown. But if anyone out there ever plays a cartridge best of 3, loses game 1, is losing game 2, but gets the desync and forces a draw, and then wins games 3 and 4, I promise I will give you a big wet kiss. Hey, speaking of mechanics that are not implemented on Pokemon Showdown, the stat overflow glitch is a generally misunderstood Gen 1 glitch that realistically only matters in a cartridge Mewtwo Ditto.
Origin, I must ask you one question. Or I have amnesia.
Wow, it would be really embarrassing if some fucking asshole described it at length in their Pokemon Showdown video. Anyway, to prevent your Mewtwo from falling prey to this glitch, you want it to have a special stat of 341, because this prevents it from exceeding 1023 at +4, which is a video game number, and it stops it from overflowing past 0. However, the way stat experience works in Generation 1 and 2 is that whenever you defeat a wild Pokemon, it just adds its base stats to your stat experience total. And the way you max them out is to reach the very normal and non-threatening number 65,535. The problem is, since you get that Pokemon's base stats every time you defeat it, there's no way for you to reach 341 special while also maxing out the rest of your other stats, which commits the greatest gamer sin of all, unoptimization, leaving you slower, weaker, and frailer than you would be otherwise. Or at least that would be the case without the help of a couple of glitches and one very important Pokemon. Alright, so admittedly this is a little outside the scope of this video, but I don't think I'm going to get a better chance to talk about it, and it's kind of funny in a cosmic sense. But it's Caterpie, it's fucking Caterpie. And Weedle too, but Caterpie's actually in all 3 versions, but Weedle's not in yellow version. You also need the Experience All, which is the Gen 1 equivalent of the XP share that just splits the experience evenly among every member of your party. And what I'm about to say might shock you. Gamers with weak constitutions should leave the room before hearing this, but there's a glitch associated with this item.
Wow. I didn't know that. I just, you're telling me now for the first time.
Alright, so the way the XP All is supposed to work is that it takes half the experience that you would have gained from defeating a Pokemon and gives it to Pokemon who actually participated in the battle, and then takes the other half of the experience and distributes it equally among the members of your party. And it works fine as long as you don't switch. However, due to an oversight, the amount that's distributed among your party is also divided by the number of Pokemon who actually participated in the battle. This means that if you switch at least once, then you will lose at least 25% of the experience that you would have gotten. Where this becomes useful is that when you divide experience by switching, it also divides the stat experience you get. This means that if you fight a Caterpie, the Pokemon with the lowest special stat in the game, and whose other stats are all just perfectly slightly higher, with a party of 6 Pokemon, including Mewtwo, who does not participate, and you switch once, you'll end up getting 1 HP, attack, defense, and speed stat XP, and 0 special stat XP. And then all you have to do is do that 65,534 more times. So, better get to it. Similarly, if you fight Magikarp, a Pokemon with 10 base attack, with a party of 6 Pokemon, and don't switch, you can get stat XP everywhere but attack, and hence get optimal self-inflicted confusion damage. However, whereas Caterpie's only niche is being the best Pokemon to kill 65,000 times, Magikarp actually has slightly better things to do with its time. Because Gen 1 is the only time Magikarp has ever been a realistic meta threat in any tier. Is it RBY14U, where Magikarp can easily check Metapod, as long as it gets like 5 crits? No, you dumb asshole. It's obviously